Welcome to the TenNet Indigenous Wisdom Research Center. I am your host, author Tenet Sategn. In this broadcast series, we explore the profound mysteries within our research. Ethiopian esoteric philosophy and alchemy. Our journey into channeling hidden wisdom begins now.
Have you ever found yourself in this incredibly frustrating loop? You decide you want to change your life.
Oh, absolutely. The classic January 1st motivation.
Right, exactly. So you go out and you buy a highly recommended self-help book. Or maybe you drop a few $100s on one of those online masterclasses about productivity or habit formation.
You get the beautifully bound planner.
Yes, the color-coded planner. You set 7 different alarms on your phone. You sit down, you take meticulous notes, and you basically memorize all the rules.
You can quote the philosophy chapter in verse.
Exactly. You know exactly what a growth mindset is. And then a month goes by, and, well, absolutely nothing in your actual reality has changed.
Not a single thing.
You are the exact same person making the exact same mistakes, just with a head entirely full of new, highly organized theories about why you shouldn't be making them.
It is the great trap of the information age, honestly. We have collectively decided to mistake the accumulation of data for actual lived transformation.
Which is such a dangerous comfort zone.
It really is. There is profound psychological comfort in just studying a problem. When you are reading about how to build a house, your brain gives you a little hit of dopamine.
It tricks you into feeling like you're actually holding a hammer.
Exactly. But you're just sitting on the couch.
Well, that gap, that massive, seemingly uncrossable canyon between knowing something in theory and actually embodying it in your physical reality, that is the core mission of today's deep dive.
And we are unpacking a truly fascinating stack of source material today to get into this.
We really are. It is an intricate, highly philosophical, and deeply spiritual audio lecture. It's actually been translated for us from Amharic.
Which brings a whole new cultural texture to the conversation.
It does. And the speaker in this audio lays out a completely unique and I'd say somewhat startling worldview on human transformation. They get into ancient Ethiopian history and what you might call the hidden mechanics of the spiritual universe.
And this is a really good moment to establish the lens through which we are going to examine all of this.
Yeah, please do, because it gets pretty intense.
It does.
Yeah.
We are diving into some highly specific, deeply personal philosophical assertions today. The speaker makes some incredibly controversial claims.
Especially about Ethiopian history.
Right, about history, the nature of ancient sites, and the reality of unseen spiritual entities. So we are here to map out the architecture of the speaker's mind.
We want to understand these concepts exactly as they present them to their audience.
Exactly. We are exploring the internal logic of this worldview. We are not here to endorse these viewpoints or try to validate these claims against objective historical records or mainstream religious doctrines.
Right. Think of it as walking through a profoundly detailed architectural blueprint. We just want to see how all the rooms connect.
Which they do in some really unexpected ways.
They really do. And the speaker actually starts this lecture with an analogy that, well, it perfectly frames the entire blueprint.
The America analogy.
Yes. They tell their audience that all of their past teachings, so the previous lectures they've given on the nature of creation, the universe, the physical world, were essentially like sitting in a cafe in Ethiopia and merely talking about what life in America is like.
Which is such a brilliant way to capture that illusion of knowledge we were just talking about.
It really hits the nail on the head. You can sit in Addis Ababa for years, drinking coffee, reading books about the United States.
You can study the geography, memorize all 50 states.
Debate the nuances of the American economy, learn all cultural rules.
You can become the foremost theoretical expert on the finished house of America.
But, and this is the kicker, that doesn't put you in America.
Not even close. You are still sitting in the cafe.
Exactly. And that is the massive pivot the speaker makes right at the start. They announce that this new teaching, the one we are dissecting today, is absolutely not about the theory of America.
It is about the brutal, exhausting process of actually moving there.
Yes. The highly bureaucratic, messy process. It's the shift from talking about a destination to the reality of like getting a passport,
Standing in line at the embassy.
getting your visa rejected, reapplying, packing your entire life into 2 suitcases, and actually getting on the plane.
The psychological demand being placed on the audience here is just immense.
Because they're basically firing them.
Right. Yeah, they are essentially firing them from their job as theorists. They are saying, look, we are done looking at the map. It is time to walk the terrain.
And walking the terrain means stepping out of the comfort of intellectual debate.
It means entering a process where you might actually fail, where you will definitely be uncomfortable, and where your current identity is going to be tested.
And the stakes for walking this terrain are so much higher than just changing your physical zip code. Moving to a new country changes your environment, but the speaker argues that the true ultimate goal of humanity, the whole reason human beings are participating in this physical reality, is to change our fundamental nature.
Because if we don't, the alternative is pretty grim.
Oh, it is intensely grim. To understand why this transformation is so urgent for the speaker, we have to look at their view of physical existence. They describe the physical world as an unending, inescapable cycle of consumption.
It is the law of the jungle, but elevated to a cosmic principle.
A completely stark, stripped-down assessment of biology.
Right. The speaker looks at the natural world and points out that, at its core, physical existence is just things eating other things. The hierarchy of consumption is absolute.
The goat eats the grass.
The leopard or the lion eats the goat, and eventually, inevitably, the lion dies.
And then the earth opens up and eats the lion.
Exactly. The soil, the fire, the wind, the water, the elements just reabsorb that biological material back into the planetary system.
Now, we all learned about the carbon cycle in middle school science class.
Right.
But the speaker frames this not as some beautiful circle of life. They frame it as a terrifying trap.
Because it implies a loss of self.
Exactly. The argument goes like this. If you, as a human being, just live a normal, mundane life, you get a job, you eat meals, you watch television, you sleep, and eventually you die, you are simply absorbed back into this mindless physical cycle.
The speaker actually uses a chilling phrase here.
Yeah, erased from the registry.
Right. They say that if you default to this cycle, you are erased from the registry of creation. You become nothing but elemental fuel for the next generation of grass and goats and lions.
The existential threat is total erasure of the individual self, which is terrifying when you think about it.
The speaker is establishing a binary universe. Either you actively engage in the grueling, terrifying process of fundamental transformation, that metaphorical move to America, or you default to being digested by the mechanics of the physical universe.
There is no neutral ground.
None. You cannot just stand still, because standing still means you are already being slowly eaten by the cycle.
So, to escape this cycle, you have to undergo a total shift in your state of being. And to explain the mechanics of that shift, the speaker leans on a classic metaphor, but they use it in a way that is incredibly disturbing.
The caterpillar and the butterfly.
Right. Usually when we hear this in self-help seminars, it's presented as this beautiful, gentle awakening. You just spread your wings and fly.
But biology doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. And the speaker emphasizes the horrific biological reality of the chrysalis. A caterpillar doesn't just glue some wings onto its back and start flying.
It doesn't keep its caterpillar identity and just add a fun new accessory.
No, it has to completely deconstruct its old self.
The biology of metamorphosis is essentially self-immolation.
Wow, yeah.
When a caterpillar enters the chrysalis, it releases enzymes that literally digest its own tissues.
It turns itself into a liquid soup of cells.
It completely destroys its previous form, its previous digestive tract, its previous legs, just to rebuild something entirely new from those raw materials.
And the speaker is demanding that exact level of spiritual and psychological deconstruction from human beings. You cannot hold on to who you were.
Which is a huge ask.
It's a massive ask.
Yeah.
And honestly, I have to stop here because this concept of total deconstruction raises a massive red flag for me. Let's think about this logically.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am the caterpillar and I have to completely liquefy my ego, my habits, my very sense of self to transform, how do I ensure that I am still the conscious entity flying around at the end of the process?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. If the old me is entirely destroyed in that soup, isn't this philosophy essentially advocating for spiritual suicide? How do I know the butterfly is actually me and not just something built out of my remains?
Your hesitation is incredibly valid, and it actually leads directly into the darkest warning in the speaker's entire philosophy.
So they address this.
They do, and they would actually validate your fear. They argue that this vulnerability, that moment when you have liquefied your old self but haven't yet formed the new self, is the most dangerous state a human can enter.
Because you're completely defenseless.
Exactly. Because you are not the only force operating in the unseen world. When you deconstruct yourself and leave the door open to become a quote-unquote new creation, there are other entities waiting to walk through that door.
Wait, so you're basically saying the chrysalis can be hijacked?
Hijacked, invaded, and entirely taken over. The speaker explicitly warns against the danger of replacement.
Replacement. That is an unsettling word.
And they don't just speak in abstracts either. They point to history. They give the example of famous historical figures, people who lived centuries ago, who are now revered as powerful saints or highly elevated spiritual figures.
Okay.
According to the speaker's worldview, there are unseen spirits that roam the world today, possessing people or performing acts, and these spirits claim to be those historical saints.
They use their names.
Yes, but the speaker makes a chilling assertion. The original human being who lived that life is gone.
The human was eaten in the chrysalis.
Precisely. They were consumed and replaced by an opportunistic spirit, exactly the way the earth eats the lion.
That is wild.
The physical or energetic transformation appeared to happen. Power was gained, miracles were supposedly performed, but the original soul, the core identity of the human, did not survive the transition. A different entity stepped into the driver's seat of that newly built butterfly.
Think about what this means on a practical, psychological level for you, the listener. Whenever we try to radically change our own lives, we face a micro version of this terror.
Absolutely. Say you want to become a high-powered executive, or you want to completely change your social circle to become healthier.
There's always that creeping anxiety in the back of your mind. If I change my environment, my habits, my friends, my daily routines, will I lose my core identity?
Will I wake up in 5 years as someone I despise?
Exactly. Will the new me essentially murder the old me? The speaker is taking that very common, very relatable human fear of change and blowing it up to a cosmic spiritual scale.
It serves as the ultimate cautionary framework for self-improvement. Evolving is mandatory if you want to escape the cycle of the jungle, but you must remain the conscious author of your evolution.
You cannot just surrender yourself to the universe and hope for the best.
Because the universe is full of things looking for an empty vessel to inhabit.
Which brings up the most urgent question of the lecture. If transformation is this perilous, if opening yourself up to become something greater means you might get hijacked and eternally erased, how on earth do you do it safely?
You need an anchor.
Right. How do you undergo the chrysalis phase without losing your soul to the highest spiritual bidder? The speaker says the absolute secret, the safety mechanism for the entire operation, lies in a singular concept, a word called Kidan.
Understanding Kidan is the key to unlocking the rest of this philosophy. Everything hinges on this concept.
Let's define it carefully then. The direct translation of Kidan is a covenant.
An agreement, a promise, or a profound union between two entities.
But the speaker knows that covenant sounds like a dusty ancient religious term. So they make a critical distinction to explain how it actually functions in real time. And to do this, they use the analogy of a marriage.
A marriage is the perfect vehicle for this idea because it inherently involves both a legal structure and a deeply personal reality.
Exactly. Imagine a standard marriage. The speaker points out that there are two entirely different layers to it. First, there is the written marriage contract.
The history.
Yes. The vows you recited 5 years ago, the legal piece of paper you signed at the courthouse, the photo album of how you met, that is the text of the marriage.
But underneath that, there is the living marriage.
Right. The actual, present tense, messy, beautiful, active connection you have with your spouse on a random Tuesday morning. That active breathing connection is Kidan.
The psychology of how a human being navigates these two layers is fascinating. The speaker dissects the behavior of a person who only lives by the paper versus a person who lives in the union.
Right. Think about a husband who views his marriage exclusively as a legal contract. If he only cares about the written rules, human nature dictates that he is going to start looking for loopholes.
Because a contract relies entirely on external enforcement.
Yes, exactly.
If the marriage is just a set of rules, that husband might go on a business trip to another country. He might think, well, I'm thousands of miles away. If I take off my wedding ring and I go to a bar and my wife never, ever finds out.
Did I technically break the contract?
Right. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? He might commit infidelity and feel absolutely zero internal remorse because in his mind, the external law hasn't caught him.
There is no internal alarm bell.
None. The contract is just a piece of paper in a drawer at home. It has no power over his physical actions in that moment.
But, and here's a contrast, if you look at a husband who actually lives in the reality of the kadan, a man who is completely, totally integrated into a living, breathing union with his partner, he doesn't need a piece of paper to stop him from cheating.
His own biology stops him.
Yes, the speaker argues that this man's own heart, his own physical eyes, won't even permit him to look at another person with that specific intent.
The very thought of betrayal physically repulses him.
The union polices itself. And it doesn't police itself through the fear of a judge or a divorce lawyer. It polices itself through the reality of the connection.
To harm the partner would be to harm the self. The external regulation of the contract has been replaced by the internal reality of the covenant.
And that is the safety mechanism the speaker was talking about regarding the chrysalis.
Exactly. If you undergo transformation bound only by rules and theories, you are vulnerable.
But if you undergo it anchored by a living kadan, the union protects you from being hijacked.
This marriage analogy is really the skeleton key for the rest of the lecture.
It is. The speaker takes this exact logic, the profound difference between living by the historical paper versus living by the active union, and scales it up.
They apply it to how all of humanity approaches spirituality, history, and the unseen world.
They categorize human behavior into three distinct paradigms, three mindsets that govern how we interact with the universe.
And this is where the speaker's critique of human behavior, and specifically their critique of Ethiopian religious and historical structures, becomes incredibly sharp and, frankly, uncompromising.
Let's break down these three paths because they are fascinating. Paradigm number one is what the speaker calls mormos. This is the path of the historians, the rule followers.
These are the people who are entirely trapped in the written marriage contract.
Right. The mormos mindset is obsessed with the past. They focus entirely on historical events, on ancient texts, on debating the exact wording of written rules. The speaker frequently refers to this textual obsession using the term wongal, which generally translates to the gospel or the good news of what happened in the past.
The fatal flaw of the mormos path, according to the speaker, is that an obsession with the history of a spiritual connection actually inoculates you against having one in the present.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Because you're so focused on what was, you ignore what is.
Because these followers are endlessly debating the text of the contract, they have no living Kidan.
And without kadan, as we saw with the cheating husband, there is absolutely no internal moral enforcement. You can do whatever you want as long as you justify it with the text.
And the speaker gives a brutal example of this.
They really do. They say that in the mormos mindset, people will raise millions of dollars to build massive, towering, beautiful churches. But they aren't doing it to house the divine.
No, they are doing it purely to compete with the church in the next town over.
It is entirely an external performance of piety, masking internal emptiness.
Because the external structure, the building, the book, the historical debate, is the only thing they actually possess. They are essentially arguing over the architectural blueprints of a house while standing out in the rain, refusing to actually build it and live inside.
And the speaker doesn't just leave this as a theoretical critique. They boldly blame this specific mormos mindset for much of the modern conflict and stagnation in Ethiopia.
That part of the audio was incredibly heavy.
It was. The speaker argues that people are so consumed by arguing over past histories, debating who wronged who centuries ago, fighting over whose historical narrative is the objectively correct one, that they're actively destroying their present reality.
They're so busy reading the marriage certificate with a magnifying glass that they are burning down the house they currently live in.
It is a profound tragedy of human nature. In their desperate attempt to preserve the memory of a spiritual truth, they smother the living reality of it.
They build statues to the historical figures who successfully underwent the butterfly transformation, but they aggressively refuse to enter the chrysalis themselves.
Right. They worship the idea of flight while remaining firmly on the ground as caterpillars, choosing instead to argue about the aerodynamics of wings.
Which naturally pushes some people to look for an alternative.
If reading the history book leaves you empty, you want action. And that brings us to the second paradigm, which the speaker calls taos. According to the lecture, the taos paradigm was the dominant operational mindset in Ethiopia from roughly the 13th to the 17th century. Now, unlike the historians of mormos, the taos practitioners actually do forge a kadan. They make living, active covenants.
But there is a catch.
A huge catch. They don't make them with the highest divine sources. They make them with local intermediary spirits.
The taos practitioners are the ultimate pragmatists. They are the deal makers of the spiritual world.
Exactly. They understand the fundamental rule that you need an active connection to bend reality.
So instead of seeking the ultimate truth, which is hard, they go to the entities that are closest at hand and easiest to negotiate with.
And the examples the speaker provides from the source material are vivid and honestly fascinating. They talk about ordinary people making these localized covenants to solve immediate physical problems.
Like a man making a deal with a taos spirit to guarantee he wins a looming court case.
Or a farmer facing a drought might forge a kadan to guarantee rain for his specific plot of land. There's a great specific story in the text about a desperately poor butcher.
Oh, I remember this one.
Right. This butcher makes a kadan, and almost overnight, his shop is continuously swarmed with customers. He becomes incredibly wealthy while his competitors go out of business.
The allure of the taos path is that it is highly transactional, and crucially, it actually works.
It gets results.
The speaker never denies the efficacy of these deals. The butcher gets his wealth, the farmer gets his rain, the court cases are miraculously won.
But you know, if I'm listening to this lecture, my immediate thought is, wait a minute. If this works so well, if it visibly brings wealth and success and agricultural prosperity, why is the speaker so vehemently rejecting it?
Right, why not just take the shortcut?
Exactly. Why not just use the taos path to get what you want in life? Why take the harder road?
Because the fine print in a taos contract is absolutely draconian.
It is terrifying.
The speaker emphasizes that while these local spirits deliver on their promises, they are ruthless, uncompromising landlords. If a human breaks even a minor rule of the covenant, if they skip a required annual ritual, or if they fail to show the exact right degree of submissive deference, the consequences are immediate, physical, and devastating.
It sounds like the spiritual equivalent of the mafia.
That is the perfect analogy. It is a cosmic protection racket.
The speaker gives a terrifying example. They talk about a human judge who might preside over a case involving someone who is protected by one of these taos spirits.
Right.
If the judge rules against the protected person, the speaker claims that judge might not even make it home that evening before his cattle mysteriously die, or his family is struck by a sudden illness.
You get the protection, you get the wealth, but you are completely owned.
You are property.
And the speaker described how people bound by these taos spirits have to constantly perform their subjugation.
Yeah, they talk about people literally walking down the road, hunched over, physically lowering themselves, pretending to be small and humble.
Just to appease these volatile spirits so they don't get struck down randomly on a Tuesday.
And this mafia dynamic reveals the deepest psychological manipulation of the taos spirits.
It's a sinister theological lie. To keep humans dependent, these intermediary spirits convince humanity that humans are fundamentally too sinful, too dirty, or too flawed to ever connect with the highest divine truth directly.
They position themselves as necessary gatekeepers. The pitch is essentially, the pure light of the Creator would instantly destroy a wretch like you, so you must deal with us in the shadows.
It is the ultimate middle management trap.
Which is such a brilliant way to phrase it. It keeps humanity permanently suppressed, relying on brokers, and terrified of stepping out of line.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the third and final paradigm.
This is the path the speaker's actively, passionately advocating for. They call it durjon.
Durjon is the absolute rejection of both previous paradigms.
It rejects the dead, ineffective history of mormos.
And it rejects the dangerous, mob-like compromises of taos.
The core premise of durjon is audacious. It says that instead of endlessly reading history books, and instead of making deals with dangerous middlemen who view you as property, you must forge a kadan, a living, present-tense, active union, directly with beings the speaker calls the Heewanun.
Heewanun translates from Amharic as the living ones, the Immortals.
According to the intricate architecture of this source material, the Heewanun are the human beings who successfully navigated the chrysalis.
They made the caterpillar to butterfly transformation without dying and without getting hijacked by a lesser spirit.
They maintained their core identity and achieved a state of immortality. The speaker names specific, towering historical figures from Ethiopian antiquity, figures like Yared, the legendary musician,
Libanos.
and Heewanun. But the crucial twist is that the speaker claims these individuals didn't just die, go to heaven, and leave behind a history to be debated. The claim is that they are still actively existing, fully conscious, and physically accessible in the present moment.
This is where the philosophy completely breaks from standard historical or orthodox religious thinking.
Oh, totally.
The psychological shift here is massive. Think about it like this for you, listening. Imagine you are desperately trying to learn how to lead a nation through a crisis, and you want to learn from Abraham Lincoln.
Okay, I like this.
If you are following the mormos path, you go to a library, you read every biography ever written about Lincoln, you study his letters, you argue with people on the internet about what he truly meant in the second paragraph of the Gettysburg Address.
You are studying the echoes of a dead man.
Right. And if you take the taos path, you go to a local psychic or a medium who claims they can channel Lincoln's ghost to help you win your local mayoral election.
But they demand a hefty cut of your campaign funds and threaten to curse you if you don't pay.
Exactly. But the durjon path. The durjon path asserts that Abraham Lincoln is quite literally still alive. He is out there.
Wow.
And if you are willing to undergo the grueling, exhausting process of proving you're serious, you don't need a book and you don't need a psychic. You can just find his number, pick up the phone, call him, and ask him for advice directly.
It is the ultimate hack. Direct, unmediated, unfiltered access to the source code of creation by communicating with the people who already mastered it.
But as we said at the very beginning of this deep dive, it is one thing to stand behind a microphone in a cafe and theorize about calling up immortal beings.
It is an entirely different thing to pack your bags, walk out your front door, and go looking for them in the physical world.
And that brings us to the climax of the source material.
Yes, where the speaker actually puts their own philosophy to the test. They transition from abstract theology to a literal travelogue. They decide to enact the grueling process of moving to America.
The expedition.
Right. The speaker details a very recent expedition they took to the legendary rock-hewn churches of Laabella. For context, these are massive, monolithic churches carved straight down into the bedrock of the earth in northern Ethiopia.
Truly one of the wonders of the world.
Absolutely. The speaker notes they went around the date of Sena 21, which corresponds to June 28th. The original plan was to spend 7 days conducting an intense, focused search for the Heewanun, the Immortals.
But astonishingly, they claim the search only took 3 days.
The methodology of their search is fascinating because they approached it almost like a tactical grid search.
Right. They didn't just wander around hoping for a vision.
Yeah.
They systematically divided the massive church complex into 3 distinct zones of operation.
Zone 1 was the area encompassing Bet Gabriel and Bet Raphael. Zone 2 was Bet Miriam and Bet Medhanelam. And Zone 3 was Bet Georgis, the famous cross-shaped church.
They began their search on the very first morning.
And here's where the narrative accelerates dramatically. They claim they found what they were looking for at their very first stop, at Bet Gabriel.
Now, the audio lecture is deliberately cryptic about the exact physical or supernatural mechanics of what they experienced in that moment.
Yeah, they don't spell it out like a movie scene.
No, the speaker just says, we found what we were looking for, and it was shocking to us, and it was shocking to the people there. They don't give us the CGI version of a glowing immortal stepping out of a rock.
Instead, what the speaker spends time detailing is the immediate, visceral confrontation that occurred right after this discovery.
The clash with the gatekeepers.
Honestly, this is the most psychologically rich part of the entire text. The traditional clergy, the priests and caretakers who physically manage and guard the churches of Laabella, witnessed the speaker conducting the search, and they stepped in to shut it down.
The clergy essentially told the speaker, you cannot do this. You are not pure enough to find the immortals.
You cannot simply walk in off the street and demand an audience with the divine.
Right. You must follow the protocol. You need to go away and fast for 40 days. You need to bow down. You need to demonstrate your worthiness.
The clergy in this moment are perfectly embodying the combined forces of mormos and taos.
They really are. They are enforcing the historical rules, the 40-day fasts, the rituals, and they're acting as the intermediary gatekeepers, insisting that the pure light cannot be approached by an ordinary, flawed human.
But the speaker's response is just breathtaking in its defiance. They do not back down.
Not even a little bit.
The speaker looks at these guardians of antiquity and says, I will not listen to you. I refuse to listen to you because you are just as lost as I am.
You sit outside these massive, ancient temples every single day. You hold the physical keys to the doors, but you have absolutely no idea how the machinery inside actually works.
You are just reading the history books. I am bypassing you. I'm going straight to the original creators.
We have to unpack the profound psychology of this confrontation because it speaks to a universal human
Or
barrier.
barrier of worthiness, right?
Exactly. The speaker is utterly rejecting the traditional prerequisite of worthiness. Every human institution, religious or secular, sets up barriers of worthiness. The clergy is saying, purify yourself first, then you may seek.
But the speaker's counter-argument is brilliant. They realize that if you wait until you are perfectly pure, if you wait until you can successfully fast for 40 days without having a single impure thought or failing once, you will never actually begin the search.
You will spend your entire life preparing for a journey you never take.
You will constantly be packing your bags for America, but never buying the ticket, because you tell yourself your suitcase isn't packed perfectly enough yet.
Precisely. The speaker even says in the audio, if I try to fast for 40 days, I'll probably die of starvation by day 4 or 5. I know my own limits.
So by demanding that of me, you are essentially telling me I am not allowed to seek the truth.
The speaker flips the script completely. They embrace their own flaws, their own unworthiness, as the exact reason they need to seek direct help from the higher beings.
It is an assertion that raw, unpolished, desperate honesty is infinitely more valuable to an immortal than a performative display of purity.
They demand a direct Kidan, flawed and messy as they are, rather than settling for an empty, perfectly executed ritual.
It's the ultimate rejection of imposter syndrome. And this surging defiance leads the speaker to make a highly controversial, sweeping claim about the physical site of Laabella itself.
A very controversial claim.
They assert that the standard, widely accepted history of who built Laabella and how it was constructed is essentially a manufactured lie.
A narrative deliberately designed to keep humanity looking backward, keeping them lost in the mormos mindset.
And this is where we must, again, clearly separate the accepted historical record from the speaker's personal mental. If you want to truly understand the house, you cannot rely on a guidebook written by tourists centuries after the fact.
You have to find the original architect. You have to bypass the caretakers and forge a kadan with the source.
And as the lecture draws to a close, the speaker tries to put words to the ineffable. They try to describe what that Kidan, that direct, living, present-tense union, actually feels like when you achieve it in the physical world.
Because they want to make it clear that this isn't just a fun mental exercise or a psychological trick. It has a tangible physical atmosphere.
Yes.
The power isn't in the building. It isn't in the perfect execution of a 40-day fast. It isn't in the historical accuracy of a textbook.
It is entirely located in the active present tense union.
The contrast is beautifully clear. If you possess a living Kidan, an empty, dirty mud hut is a temple of immense power.
But if you only possess the written contract, the mormos mindset, then a massive ancient cathedral is just an empty stone box where people go to argue about ghosts.
Wow.
When you strip away the specific historical debates and the terminology of spiritual entities, that brings us to the absolute core insight of this entire deep dive.
What we are really examining here are the fundamental mechanics of true, lasting change.
Exactly. Whether you are trying to master a complex new career skill, whether you are trying to salvage a broken relationship, or whether you are genuinely seeking profound spiritual enlightenment, merely studying the history is never going to be enough.
Memorizing the rules of the self-help book will not save you.
You have to step into the arena, you have to willingly risk the horrific deconstruction of the chrysalis, and you have to forge a living, present-tense connection with the reality you are trying to inhabit.
And that process requires a level of obsession that most people are, frankly, deeply uncomfortable with.
It's true. It's intense.
The speaker makes a passing but incredibly beautiful comparison at the very end of the audio. They say this search for Kidan, this pursuit of true connection, cannot be treated like a hobby.
You don't just schedule seeking the immortals for 1 hour a day, like going to the gym and then go back to your normal life.
It has to be like falling in love.
The all-consuming, terrifying kind of love.
Exactly. When you fall truly, deeply in love with someone, that person occupies your mind constantly. It isn't scheduled.
You hear their voice in every song playing on the radio.
You think you see their face in the crowds on the street. Your entire perceptual reality is fundamentally altered by your pursuit of union with them.
That is a level of relentless dedication required to move from the theory of transformation reading about America to the reality of actually arriving there.
It's profound.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about the most important goal, or perhaps the most vital relationship in your life right now. The one thing you want to improve or change more than anything else. Take a hard, honest look at how you're approaching it.
Are you treating it like a marriage certificate?
Are you just following the superficial rules, reading the history, and looking for loopholes so you can tell yourself you tried without actually having to change? Or are you actively, bravely building a kadan, a messy, demanding, living, breathing union that forces you to completely deconstruct who you used to be? Because if you're only reading the history, you might just be the caterpillar, staring at a glossy picture of a butterfly, wondering why you still can't fly. Something